everyone, my name's Simon and welcome to Insert Past Pun here. Today we've got another interview for you, and this one is with Dead Palette. I've been particularly excited about doing this one ever since he agreed to do it, and he's a writer I've only just sort of been getting into, and I've been loving every second of it. So I've broken out the fine china, spruced the place up a bit, and got the finest aged brandy on ice, if that's what you're supposed to do with brandy. As always, the stories we discuss I've linked in the description, so I highly recommend that you click the links and check them out. They're both extremely good. But without further ado, here is my interview with Dead Palette. Enjoy. So, hi, my name's Simon. Welcome to Insert Past Pun here, and today I'm speaking with Dead Palette. Say hello.
Hello.
Hi there. Again, thanks a lot for taking the time to come and speak to me. As I say, it's really appreciated. And as I say, the first two people I interviewed actually listed you as an influence. I thought, as you're in the same Discord as me, we might as well get to the source and see what you think about stuff.
Yeah, I don't, I don't have a giant following, but I guess I command a little bit of respect around here.
I don't know. I felt like, as I say, everyone I seem to speak to is like, "Oh yeah, Dead Palette, that's epic. You've actually got a real writer on." I'm like, well, yeah, I feel everyone's a real writer, but you know, you've got way more videos than most people.
It's a bizarre thing that I'm a writer. That's what people know me as, because I do this narration stuff, and typically people know people as narrators, and the fact that people are like, no, that's not what's important, the stories are what we like, that does mean a lot to me.
Well, this is because, I mean, as far as I saw from my research before, it's like you don't actually have any written down stories online. It's all videos, isn't it?
I've got one, and that was kind of like an experiment more than anything.
So what was behind the sort of the choice to go with the videos rather than sticking it on like the Creepypasta wiki or any of those?
So I wanted something that was more readily consumable, and because the narrations are more readily consumable than the actual written down stories, I felt that was the more natural route to go. I also like more realistic first person stories, and so narrating my own stories, that gives me the ability to act out and kind of get in character more than I would be able to if I was just writing down the story. I feel like a lot of creepypastas are written in a way designed to be spoken, and almost like a person giving a nervous police report, and like, this weird thing happened to me, and I don't know how to comprehend it and process it. And so being able to have the stuttering and the acting and that kind of stuff be a quality in my stories, I think also benefited it. And the biggest reason is I am insanely illiterate and dyslexic and unable to edit my own stories. I can edit my stories like 7-8 times, spell checking them, going through grammar, reading them word by word, pointing at each individual word, and spelling mistakes and grammar mistakes will still make it through.
That's pretty impressive then. Like, well, I suppose it gives you that sort of control, and I suppose it saves someone else doing it and doing it worse. Because that's I say, from the videos of yours I've listened to, it does seem to be a lot more powerful with the way that you're doing it, in that it feels a lot more real, because, as you say, it's like you're recounting it as something that actually happened. So yeah,
But I mean, like, I have had like people try to edit my stories, and they would correct aspects of grammar, and then I would be like, no, it was right before, and they're like, no, it's perfectly wrong, and then I like act it out, and they're like, oh, that's why it was wrong, because it sounds good when you speak it.
Yeah. So, I mean, when did you sort of start writing? How long have you been writing for?
I've gone by the name Dead Palette for about 5 years now, I believe. So I was writing before that, but everything that is public started about 5 years ago.
Nice. And what's like the first thing you can remember writing?
The first thing I remember writing was probably trailer, which is my first video that I uploaded, which is a story about a boy who goes into who as is out of school. He's in kindergarten, not kindergarten. He's in elementary school. He's very young. There is a trailer that is for a before and after school care program, and he's never seen people go in and out of it. He's just been told that's what it's for, that it's for daycare. And then he goes in there one day. He sneaks away from everyone else during recess and goes in there and realizes that it's abandoned and that there's just like broken glass and dead bugs and everything around there. And then he hears a bunch of yelling and he hides in there and he's like freaking out about the yelling and he thinks that maybe he's in trouble or something. And the reason that he was able to sneak off was because two kids were getting into a fight. And later that night, the police find him, and they're like, and his mother finds him and a teacher and everything. And they're like, we're so glad you're okay. And then he finds out that the reason that they were yelling was because one boy killed another boy with a rock in that fight. And that was really trying to deal with a feeling that I think young people have when they're trying to learn the rules of society. He has like these misplaced feelings of guilt, and it's just like a small weird story that is traumatic to this kid. And I think people, when they listen to it, they can understand why it's traumatic, but explaining to someone why it's traumatic is not so easy, I think.
Yeah, yeah, no, I know what you mean. Like, like I say, I haven't got that far back in your back catalogue. Actually, I started at the latest one and been working my way back. But you know, I'll have to check one out. It does sound good. I mean, do you still like that one? I know a lot of people like look back and hate the stuff they did to start with, but
I'm not a huge fan of the audio quality, but outside of that, I'm pretty happy with the performance and the story itself. I really like the story itself. I think that's a killer story. God damn it!
Yeah, that's it. Stand by it. Always stand by it. So what sort of horror do you like to write the most? What really gets you going?
I I focus on trying to make stories that are realistic, that have just a little bit of nonsensical insanity thrown in there. I like really grounding my stories and having a lot of minute details that make a story feel believable, essentially. And so if there is a kind of vodka in the story, I'm not going to just say that it's vodka. I'm going to specify the kind of vodka. I'm going to specify what the bottle looked like. Was the bottle a new bottle? Is it like just every little detail that I can pull out of that kind of stuff? Because I think that kind of misleads people into missing when the horror is going to hit them. And I think that that's the most effective way to horrify an adult audience.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Sort of building up the picture in their head, basically, being let them to really sort of, or see and feel what the character is feeling, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. So who sort of what sort of writers inspire you then? Where do you sort of take your inspiration from?
That's more of a difficult question because I am, as I've mentioned, when I make these jokes about me being illiterate and having reading problems, I mean, I really am. I've been diagnosed with these things, and that's kind of been a big reason as to why I focused on being a writer so much, even though I'm an artist outside of this, a visual artist, and went to school for that and everything. But I wanted to become a writer despite the fact that I have these massive problems reading. So I haven't read a whole lot of books. I've read a hell of a lot of short stories. And so Slime Beast was a huge influence on me. And so was 1000 Vultures, the person who wrote Pen Pals and Footsteps and that kind of stuff. those are the bigger influences on me, as well as Silent Hill is a big thing, but Silent Hill is kind of doing a different kind of horror. They're more there's not as much realism in Silent Hill, you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But that some of the concepts that they're dealing with, like perception and stuff like that, influences me more on. It inspires me more than it's an influence, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, yeah, I know what you mean. Like, no, it's weird. It's weird you should mention A Thousand Vultures, because the I say the story sent over to me, and some of the other stuff I've heard from yours. Like, it really, that I was actually thinking of that when I was listening to it. Is that the style of it, if you know what I mean, just sort of really feels very similar, and I can definitely see where you've got that from. That's really cool.
Well, I think so. I sent over two stories, one my own and one that
Yeah.
is not my own, and then Thousand Vultures. All three of the stories involve a sort of exploration of youth, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
And so the Thousand Vultures is really. I like the idea that they're trying to write this story not for anyone else but for themselves, to just try and put it in perspective.
Mm.
And I think that's the kind of horror that I'm drawn to, is now that you have Reddit and you have 4chan and you have like these Ask Me Anything threads and you have people talking on these throwaway accounts, they're trying to not necessarily just entertain people, but overcome these traumatic feelings by themselves.
Mm.
And I think that you can easily kind of bullshit that and then turn it into a story. So sometimes you can take, you can just kind of fabricate these kinds of things. And I guess the goal is trying to make the reader question whether they were real or not.
Yeah.
And so the Thousand Vultures thing, the first part of it sounds realistic, and eventually it kind of gets more muddled, but there is such a suspension of disbelief in these kinds of stories, and that's something that I want to hone in on.
Nice. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I understand what you're saying. So, I mean, for you, is like suspension of disbelief king? Then is that the thing that you need in there? It needs to be realistic, or
Yes, and I think some people would look at certain aspects of creepypasta and say, well, that's not realistic. So how can you, why are you saying that? For instance, the story Abandoned by Disney, there's one where there's this a giant snake in it. And you might say, well, that's not perfectly realistic. And it's like, no, but it's a person telling tall tales. So it's like, oh, that's just a little bit of bullshit. That's just a little bit of bullshit. So it's okay.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
And when you have everything else written really well, the little bit of bullshit that you put in there feels real. And so that's how you get that. And it's a very bizarre situation where it makes you question your own reality of like, I don't know, maybe there was a big snake. And that's something I like. So reality is definitely king.
That's it. And I suppose that's how stories have like always been told in many ways. Is that I know when I'm recounting a story that's actually happened to me, I'll nearly always embellish it slightly here and there, just because you might as the lie's always slightly better than the truth. I'm always way more wittier in the stories I've put than I am in real life.
And you can't help but do that.
Yeah,
And that's a natural thing that you have. If you're lying to a friend that you're telling to if you're telling a story to your friends and you're lying about certain aspects of it, if it's not hurting anybody, you're just making it better.
yeah, yeah.
As long as it's not like something to like boast up your ego, like, no, you guys don't even know how great this orgy was.
I swear
Then
it was that one time, but it was mind blowing.
yeah.
That's it. Yeah, it nearly always spirals from when it boils down to the fact it's actually I saw an orgy once and it looked quite cool, but
Well, if I was writing that story, and I have, it's like, hey, there was an orgy. It ended up being horrifying. I don't know what happened to my friend. They
That's
were
it.
lost in the pile.
That's it. I haven't seen him in 3 weeks, but apparently he's happy.
Yeah.
So yeah, so as mentioned before, let's say you sent over a couple of stories for me. If we start with the one of yours that you sent over, is it the Marshmallow Family? I actually listened to this one last night, and this really shut me up. Like, this is I really enjoyed it, but and obviously, what I'll do is, in the description for this video, I'll post a link to it for anyone listening. If you haven't heard it already, I highly recommend you go and listen to it. So if we say they've definitely listened to it, we can be as spoilery as we like, right?
Yeah.
That works out.
Yeah. Hmm.
So give us a basic overview of the story then.
So it does deal with very sensitive subject matter, but essentially what happens is a young man is trying to find where he is at school and is having some difficulties and some trials and tribulations, but then he kind of is taken in by this group of friends, and they are gamers. They like going around the city and riding bicycles. They're kind of into the things that he's into, and he starts to realize that there's some problems because they're exhibiting behaviors that he just doesn't necessarily find ethical. So they're going into convenience stores and stealing stuff, like shoplifting and doing that kind of stuff, and that makes him uncomfortable. And I've been in situations like that. I'm sure other people have, where you're either doing something like shoplifting or, in my case, being stuck with people who are shoplifting, and it's like, oh, Jesus Christ, I didn't know I was getting into this.
Yeah.
That's a very real life tension, and those are the kind of tensions I like. And I like using those kinds of tensions to ground bigger ones. And so he's having those kinds of problems, and oh boy, he is dealing with that, and then
Shit gets weird.
shit gets really weird, and he's beat up. He's beat up by them if he like threatens to tell anyone about the shoplifting and stuff. But then they continue to act like they're friends, and he's having trouble navigating it. And eventually, and I swear to God, this sounds like it's a what's the term I'm looking for? Whiplash. But I swear to God, I think I do a good job of building this up. They go to a giant water filtration thingy, and they sneak behind it. And there is a thing called the Marshmallow Kid, or the Marshmallow Baby, which is, I can't remember what I called it, but it is this weird, grotesque baby mutant thing that the girl in the group birthed, and is just kind of like assimilating with garbage and Doritos and all the junk food that they stole and everything. And they are just like in for this. They love this, and they're all having an orgy with the only girl in the group. And the narrator is then raped, just out and out raped, and described enough to make people feel uncomfortable, and then
You definitely did that.
and boy, let me tell you, I even pulled back from what I was originally going to write, and because I felt that I did the job, and anything else would just be torture. I didn't want to torture people that much more. I wanted it would be wrong if I didn't be honest about where the story was going, and let it be what it is, which is a very vivid rape. But I didn't want to, I don't know, keep going, because the story could have been twice as long and horrifying. And then he when he finally escapes from the situation, and the only way he really could escape was by playing along, which is why he was raped and everything.
Mm.
He goes home, drinks a bunch of rum from his parents' liquor cabinet, goes and early in the morning gets a shovel and kills the marshmallow baby, and they all end up in jail or on the run, and he just has to live with these traumatic memories.
This is it, and I know, and sort of, I really get what you're saying about the whole about it sort of being a situation that everyone's been in. Because I must say, for the first 2/3 of it, I think I was just wondering, oh, I relate to this completely. This is amazing. Like I've been in that situation, and then it's just like, oh my god, and again with as I with the whole sex thing, it's like I can remember being that age and sort of thinking that aside from the marshmallow baby, obviously, that sort of
Yeah.
situation would be amazing. But then the actual, even getting near a girl would just terrify me. and it just, and that's, I think that's what really sort of brought the thing home for me, especially like, again, correct me if I'm wrong. I like sort of try and look for metaphor and stuff.
Hmm.
But with with the marshmallow baby, it's kind of felt like that's kind of what can sort of grow inside you if you start hanging out with the wrong crowd and just doing things because that's what everyone else is doing, and it's kind of symbolically killing it at the end. God, I've disappeared
Yeah.
right up my own arse. But
No, that was kind of my intention. Is I think that you took it in a more fanciful direction, but I think that you could definitely make that reading. I think that if you take it in a more literal direction, it's starting out, okay, these people are into bicycles. I think I'll get into bicycles because they're also into video games. So I'll start riding around on a bicycle too, because that's what these people do. And I want to be with them because they play video games. So I will also be a bicycle. It's like a normal give and take that you have in a healthy social circle. Like, okay, I'll give that a try.
yeah,
And then there's the shoplifting, and it's like, oh no, that's a big escalation to like, no, I'm not okay with that. And then there's I think that a lot of people can relate to this too, is not necessarily physical abuse, but being in a group where you are abused and then they just act like you're still part of their group. And it's just like, wait, I thought I wasn't welcome here. What is going on? And there's weird emotional abuse there. And so it's just like this escalation until this commitment of, here's the secret about the marshmallow baby, and you have to you're in on the secret now. And then of course the actual rape, which is just like, you've had this happen to you, so now you can't back out, I guess.
yeah,
You know, it's like, this will stick with you forever. So you're with us.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? And I just felt that was the natural escalation.
no, that makes sense. And so, oh,
And again, there's the whole aspect of this main character. Did he want to be sexually active? Probably, but it was still rape. You know.
yeah, exactly. Especially towards the end, so I almost sort of like once you get to the end and all's done and done. What's the last line? Is that something about love and suffering or something like that that he now associates the two together forevermore, sort of thing. And there was a point I was going to make that I was totally cool and deep that it's now escaped me. That was it. There's almost
Well, as you think of that, I think I really wanted to also, and this is more of a personal thing, but I really wanted to illustrate what it looks like when a guy is raped, because I don't think people quite understand. And it's like, you want to be sexually active, so how can you? And I think I really hope that this story kind of illustrates how that can happen, and what that would look like, and maybe explain why there's a lot of fear around coming forward about this kind of thing. And I think people like you mentioned, like there is like this initial thing, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's like a reptile brain theme of like, well, like no, that would be awesome, and then you're just like immediately like, no, that's fucking terrible.
Yeah.
And I like that, like, no, it's okay. Oh my God, no, it's super not okay.
But
And I think I was trying to play with that.
yeah, definitely. I mean, that was a point that I've just remembered that I was going to make earlier. But it's like almost like with those last few lines, it almost feels like there's a sense of sort of longing on behalf of the main character. Almost sort of like you're saying, I'm scarred by this, but you know, it was horrible, and it was definitely rape. But there's still that sort of reptile part of the brain going, but I had sex.
Yeah, and also just like I had sex and that was my first time,
Yeah.
and that can't not be my first time now,
Mm,
and that's why it's so damaging.
definitely. Now, I mean, was that your aim when you first started writing the story, or did it sort of morph into that? Or
This story was like I don't always plan out my stories methodically, but this one I pretty well had like the escalation in mind from the beginning.
mm,
And the first thing that I thought of was the marshmallow itself, because that was an image from my childhood. So I went down to my hometown and did some photography of it. Burping. Did some photography of it and really just let that image sit, and then eventually that story came to mind, and I just kind of put the two together.
nice. So,
Yeah.
like while you were writing it, then I mean, did you sort of come across any roadblocks? Whether sort of any points where you sort of got stuck, and you know, if there were, like, how did you sort of overcome that?
Um, um, I think there's the scene where they put the soap into the socks and try and beat him down and everything, beat down the narrator,
Mm,
and I was kind of having trouble getting a visualization for that, of like trying to describe that this place is a public place, but it's private enough for them to be able to get away with that without someone calling the police.
mm.
And I think that is kind of like I'm not sure I'd nailed that part as well as I could have, but that's kind of like the biggest problem I was really running into with this story. I don't know.
No, no, that makes sense. I mean, that was kind of going to be my next question. Is that 'cause obviously you did this? Was it a couple of years ago you wrote this one?
Hmm.
Like, is there anything you change about it now, looking back, or?
Uh, I shared this one with you because no. um, there are definitely things here and there in stories that I wish I could have changed, and I often do change them. I'm not sure when this is going out, but this month for my Patreon video, I'm redoing an old story I did uh, called Huntmaster, and it's about someone. It's a very surreal thing where someone wakes up as a deer, which kind of it might sound fanciful and not realistic, but if you listen to it, I think you'll understand why it's realistic. Um, it's and he's being hunted by deer hunters. So you wake up as a deer and you're being hunted by deer hunters, and it's a very surreal thing after a night of drinking Jägermeister. Um, I'm redoing that story and changing the ending because I wasn't happy with it, and I feel like I had more to offer now in terms of the visual aspect and everything along those lines. So if I don't like a story, I do sometimes take a crack at fixing it.
Mm.
That's kind of the benefit of being uh, a small YouTube person, is that people don't get mad if you like rework something. They're like, no, just keep doing it until you're happy with it.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's cool. So with the so yeah, so is this your favourite story that you've done? Would you say, or
Um,
and why? Is my next question.
it's hard to say if it's my favorite or not. It's there's an element to this one that I really like because one, it's a longer narrative. I have some shorter ones that I really like, it's a longer narrative that I think really did a nice job of making people feel gross, and that was my express goal. And I think I have a video that's more successful in terms of view count that I like equally, called The Blind Voyeur, which is about someone is who shoots voyeur porn, where people go out into public at night with like night vision camera, and he films them having sex, but it's predetermined. It's like, it's not really like, oh, I just stumbled upon this or something.
Yeah, yeah.
It's faked in that way. And he, long story short, he accidentally ends up filming what was a real life rape, and feeling really guilty about that because he felt like he was implicit in that. And if you listen to the story, you'll see how those events could occur. But he's feeling like he's responsible, and I like that. I like the idea that of making people feel responsible for something that they didn't do.
Yeah.
And so I think that emotion that I was trying to evoke, I think I did a pretty good job of that in that story, and I like that. I think that that's funny.
Nice, nice. Yeah, no, you've definitely got a lot from the videos of yours I've seen. You've definitely got a really interesting way of raising and then killing a boner. Um,
Thank you, thank you.
okay.
Then re-raising it and then killing it again.
Exactly. You make me feel worse about my boners than any religious upbringing ever has.
Mm.
But okay, so I'd say that's the Marshmallow Family. The other one you sent over was Where Bad Children Go, and that was read by the Little Fears, wasn't it?
Hmm.
So again, it's one I'm going to link in the description, spoilers and that. So the basic story then is a girl who used to watch a television show back when she was in Lebanon, and then comes back where there was essentially, it was implied that that kids were being hurt because they were doing bad things, and then she goes back later on and to take photos of the studio where it was all filmed, and finds out that there's actually a torture room in there where kids were actually being hurt. That's essentially the gist, isn't it?
Yes.
That's it. I'm obviously doing a very poor job of explaining it, but I thought I'd give you a break from describing a story.
Well, on that note, I mean, there's the story is read by the Little Fears. Obviously, it's not written by the Little Fears, but the Little Fears has written her own stories. But I like the Little Fears is a big inspiration for me because she really did care about I have a huge problem with the narrator community, and I think most people.
We'll get onto that. That.
But the Little Fears is very much so a person who wasn't trying to elevate themselves. They were trying to elevate the stories that they found and the stories that they wrote. And I'm very much so a art above artist person.
Yeah.
Like I want the art to be elevated, not the person. And I really respected that about the Little Fears before she went and disappeared and started doing weird things on other YouTube channels. But the Little Fears did a great job of narrating the story because they they did a nice job of trying to of playing a character that's trying to cover up all these emotions and feelings about the events that have occurred. But speaking of religious upbringing and repression, that's what the story is really about.
Yeah, no, I definitely know what you mean there, because I say it paints it all as just sort of like a slightly heavy-handed bit of propaganda at the time, but then once you get the big reveal at the end, it all suddenly becomes like really struck home for me, like how it was really visceral, just sort of being like, oh yeah, this wasn't just this is what they were actually doing. It's not that's it. And it, weirdly enough, because I'm Jewish, like family's been Jewish forever, like it really reminded me of like when I first saw stuff they used to do in the Holocaust sort of thing. Like it just was like, wow, like my mind was blown. Like that is not that's something real almost, and that, as you say, this actually feels like a story that could be real.
Well, that's the thing is, um, let's cut out the last minute of the story. That this is a religious propaganda TV show.
Yeah.
It is real. Like maybe not this one specifically, but this is real. If you go to Pakistan or Israel, they have TV shows that are this for kids. This is still airing. This is not fiction. This is real. This is really fucking real. and there are shows telling you in Pakistan, it's telling you how evil the Jews are, and in Israel, it's telling you how evil the Muslims are. And in this one, this story is more directed towards saying how great their religion is and saying, you know, don't put your hands under the covers. Like, and I just love the way that that's phrased. It's so disturbing of like, you're talking about masturbation, but they don't want to say that. So they say putting their hands under the covers in case kids haven't figured out that that feels super good.
Yeah.
Like, that's so gross.
That's
that
it.
they,
Yeah. It's the reframing it for kids almost, sort of like that really that can make things seem even worse than just saying it.
Yeah, and so that's the story is just it's just so perfect. They really are hitting on all of this social repression and all of that kind of stuff. And Chris Straub, who is an asshole, said something very and who wrote a good story, said a very poignant thing about something that you can do in creepypasta with kids related media, which is there is a sacred bond between children and adult. And when you make a kid show that violates that in some way, that is really disturbing. And so by using these uptight religious morals, they're really violating that and putting fear into the hearts of kids that doesn't need to be there. And that's something that just really spoke to me. I don't know.
No, I understand that. So I mean, with the video, I mean, so you mentioned that you know, sort of you are influenced by the Little Fears. I mean, what? How do you feel it sort of influences you?
There's videos posted by the Little Fears that don't have finite conclusions, that are just kind of bizarre and weird anecdotes of things that have happened that make you feel weird. So they have one where she's just explaining the mating process of deep sea anglerfish.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, yeah, that's disturbing. That's enough. They have one describing, let me think. There's one where they're talking about a specific bathroom in Canadian Parliament, and it's just like about how there's a law that says unmarried men are not allowed to go in there. And it's not exactly explained why, but you know that it has to do with prostitution or something. It's just, it gives you these weird feelings, and I like that quality. So they have stories where there are finite conclusions, as with Where the Bad Kids Go, but there are ones where it's more vague, and that's what real life horror is. Real life horror doesn't always have this ultimate crescendo of here's the resolution. It doesn't always follow a 5-act structure. It doesn't always get neatly wrapped up into a bow. Sometimes it's just this anticlimactic, oh, I feel weird. And I really like, oh, I feel weird.
Yeah.
That is a great emotion. And I feel that more authors would benefit from, especially horror authors, benefit from just backing off and letting a story kind of sit like that.
No, I know what you mean. I mean, I can only speak for my own writing, but I think there's always that temptation to have the climax at the end, to have the nearly always the death or the terrifying thing happening right at the end to leave you on that sort of high note.
And I mean, like what we've talked about with my stories, we talked about two stories that end in rape. There's nothing wrong with going up to that crescendo. Just you really need to assess if you need that skeleton to pop out. And that's the way that I phrase it. It's just like, if you, does the story benefit from having a skeleton pop out, or can you just let it be what it is? I have written stories where I really debated of like, oh, people aren't going to like this unless a skeleton pops out. And I just kind of had to shed those insecurities and just be confident that the concept will do its work.
Yeah. No, I understand. I mean, and I'd say this all quite neatly. I'm amazed at our segueing ability into sort of like creepypasta in general. I mean, now I know obviously you also do Undercooked analysis with David King. So obviously you read a lot of creepypasta, and you've even read some of mine. And
yeah.
So I think we've covered what you think makes sort of like a good one. I mean, what's most likely to put you off a creepypasta, do you think? What's really going to just make you go, no, this is awful?
Well, now we have to have the stupid conversation that we always have to have when talking about this kind of stuff. We have to define what creepypasta is and what creepypasta isn't, and all this stupid shit, because it's stupid and it's a vague term that doesn't mean anything now. Creepypasta is just internet-based horror, and sometimes it's not even that. And sometimes people will say like, "Oh, Lovecraft is." It's like, no, what? No, that's stupid. Shut up. And so, defining the kind of creepypasta that I'm interested in specifically, people in my circles have started calling it ashcan horror as a substitute, because it's talking about a very specific thing. We're talking about the realistic story that can't have happened in the past, that's very contemporary, and has a little bit of bullshit injected into it to just make it feel surreal. So dealing with that, I think the biggest thing that really can turn me off from a story like that is just getting facts wrong that are easily verifiable. Yeah. So if you want to put a bunch of facts into your story, just make sure that they're real. And it's not hard to kind of fudge things to be misleading. You have to make sure that all of your loose ends are not traceable. You can have loose ends, you just can't have them be traceable. So if you look at a story like The Art of Jacob Emery, at the end of that story, all of the tangible evidence burns down, but there's this lingering doubt around the events. So everything burns down, so it's not a problem of trying to verify that the events of that story happened. So making sure that you tie up those loose ends and that the facts of a situation are verifiable in some way, and giving people something that they can verify makes stuff feel more real.
No, I understand. That makes sense. I say I say I strive for realism, but I've written some horrendously unrealistic stories. But I do, but yeah, I definitely enjoy it when something I like. And the one that pops to mind is Ted the Caver, sort of like that classic, sort of like you can't really verify that this stuff didn't happen as such.
Yeah. That speaks to me, but I mean, like, going to the subject of unrealistic stuff, I'm a genre hound just because I like to define things and have a way of talking about a specific phenomenon. But there's nothing wrong with an artist doing whatever it is that they want to write, obviously. Yeah. I feel that I write stuff that's unrealistic from time to time, or more romantic, and goes against what I'm normally about. But I'm conscious of that decision, and I want people to be conscious of what kinds of stories they are writing and be okay with it. Just be conscious of it, I guess, is the deal.
That's cool. So, I mean, one question I always like to ask people, because it's something that's kind of rife in the sort of online horror community, but tropes-wise, I mean, do you think it's ever acceptable to use a trope?
Yes.
Are there any particular ones that you really like?
I love tropes. I think it's all about finding a way to do something that hasn't been done with it before. and a lot of it is really just set dressing. And so there's the whole lost episode thing, and people look at that as um, rightly so as shallow. And the reason is because they're copying the three big ones that came out first: Suicide Mouse.avi, Dead Bart, and Squidward Suicide. Those are the three big ones that people look at. They're not looking at the structure of the story itself. They're thinking there's a lost episode of X, and so they're focusing on putting that coat of paint on it of Family Guy lost episode, or this lost episode, or that lost episode, and they're not thinking about why those stories were successful. And if they thought a little bit more, they, one, either wouldn't write the story, or two, would figure out a way to really make it work. But they're not putting in that effort of giving readers that ultra suspension of disbelief. It's not just the suspension of disbelief. It is, this could have happened. And so to keep talking about myself, because it's my favorite subject, I rewrote Dead Bart to try and show people how you could do something like that. Because Dead Bart got a rap for being kind of unrealistic, but it's a kind of unrealistic story that I like because it's goofy for its faults and everything. And so it has a scene where Matt Groening, the creator of The Simpsons, hands someone at a convention a website link and says, you shouldn't be investigating this or whatever. And then he opens it up and it ruins his computer, but eventually he gets an episode and it's Dead Bart and everything.
Yeah.
And Matt Groening would never do that, and that's stupid. And I'm sorry, Cosby down.
It's for starters, you know.
yeah, it doesn't make any sense on like so many levels. And so I cut that out and I looked at what has been going on that I could ground this in, and I realized there was this guy named the Fox News Mole who was working at Fox News or whatever and like left with like a bunch of like inside information that was really hurting the company and everything. And so as part of my story, this guy got a tape of this lost episode. And so I was trying to like find real world news events that could tie into this. And so he's at this guy's house party where they're watching this episode of The Simpsons as kind of like this prized possession. You know how like sometimes people will like steal the hood ornaments off of cars and stuff and be like, haha, like kind of like that, like haha, and then like, oh no, the video is disturbing and all that kind of stuff. And I tried to ground it in, no, the people who were making the show at the time were really depressed, and this was the thing that they were making, and maybe it wasn't even meant to air. And I'm giving all of these like reasons to doubt the story that are kind of like get out of jail free cards of like, maybe they weren't meaning to air this. Maybe the supernatural twist at the end was just a joke and all of this kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Giving myself as many outs as possible to add realism to it, if that makes any sense.
Oh yeah, no, totally. It's all about giving yourself the outs, I think.
So I think that you can embrace a trope and do something well with it. You just have to be knowledgeable of what it is that you're bringing to the table that makes it different. So like I'm constantly, it very rarely happens, I'm constantly thinking, how can I write a lost episode thing? Because those are cool. I want to like a lost episode story. It's just they're hard to write and they're usually shit. But
I find them a lot like conspiracy theories almost. If you believe, like if lost episodes are to be believed, everyone in TV is like either absurdly depressed, psychotic, or a murderer. Which, you know, in fairness, quite a lot of them are, but probably not anywhere near as cool as Wayne.
Yeah.
So now this brings on to like the question that I've actually been the most excited to ask you. What do you think of the online horror scene at the moment?
I have a lot more mixed feelings about than people might assume, because I think it's more centralized than it needs to be. And so obviously the biggest problem is that the biggest influencers are those on YouTube that are reading the works of other people. This is a giant issue, and people might not necessarily see the reason why. They might say, well, they're putting those stories out there for free to be read and everything. It is the lowest common denominator. And if I'm going to pull a Vince McMahon here. You don't like the stuff that you think you like. You do not like these narrators. And they're profiting off of something that was meant to be free. And it's if you're going to say that it's perfectly ethical and fine and everything like that, it is at the very least, and I think it's more than this, it's at the very least super fucking skeezy and sleazy and shitty to do.
Yeah.
Especially when these authors are putting this stuff out there for free and trying to build this community and write these stories that are weird and unique. And I think that narrators are quashing it by taking away credit from authors who didn't even want credit. They just wanted these stories to oftentimes just be out there uncredited. And that was kind of the beauty of it, is that if it's just this throwaway burner account or it's an anonymous post, then it has more credence that this person went through something dramatic and they didn't want any trace of it to be linked back to them. Yeah. And so they're treating these stories like they're just consumables to throw away, like it's just nothing. So they're, writing, 5 true blah, blah, blah stories. If you're putting true in the title, then you're insecure.
Yeah.
The quote, the true stories that I write, that I want people to feel are true, I don't put true anywhere in there. I say, you might not believe this or something along those lines, but I don't have that insecurity. And these people are clickbaity, lowest common denominator assholes that are destroying the community by drawing attention away from the people who are really trying to build it up. The nameless, oftentimes, people who are writing these stories and these accounts for us all to enjoy.
Well, I mean, so I'd say if you could, what would you do to sort of like to fix these problems? How would you go about it?
Well, YouTube's platform is kind of a giant problem to begin with because it benefits low effort content and dramatically hurts high effort content. There's no reason to be an animator. There's no reason to there's less reason to be a musician. All of these kinds of things. It really is damaging to these kinds of people. Mm-hmm. And I think that you're never going to be able to get rid of this problem in the strictest way. But I would just, it's something where people have to wake up and realize that content is not good for the community. And you're seeing this hashtag of like hashtag keep YouTube creepy. And that's so bullshit because YouTube was not where these stories came from. They came from Reddit. They came from 4chan and the X board and these kinds of things.
Yeah.
They came from people spilling their souls on, trauma websites and taking sometimes actual real experiences and I hesitate to use this term, but trivializing them. And that's a frustrating thing because people probably didn't want these stories to be read in this way. And they're taking away the gravity from this kind of stuff and turning it into this goofy sensationalist bullshit. And it's supposed to be serious, goddammit. It's still real to me, goddammit, as the wrestling fan once said. Yeah. I don't think that you can solve this problem. I think it just needs to be an awakening on the part of the community that this stuff is not benefiting us. That the reason that this stuff is dying is because everyone's doing it. And let's be real. They say like, oh, I love their voice and I love this and that about them. You wouldn't listen to them read the phone book. You're full of shit. No, you like the stories. And if you're not liking the stories anymore, maybe it's because all of the authors are being scared away. All of the good authors are being scared away and they don't want to write for this community anymore because it's toxic.
Yeah. No, that's that makes a lot of sense actually because yeah, I mean, I must when I literally the first story I wrote, I stuck up on I managed well I got it on creepypasta.com just before it was bought out, and I think within a day there was a narrator who'd done a reading of it, monetized the video, got like 10,000 views on it or something, and I was sort of like, at first I was a bit fluttered, but then I was like, hang on a second, this is my stuff, like.
And that's the thing is, that narrator doesn't give a shit about that story. And there's a decent chance that the narrator didn't even read the story before reading it. Like,
Yeah.
like over under, what are the chances that that person like gave a shit or could like point out anything about that story? So obviously it's not them trying to elevate the story, it's them trying to get those ad clicks and to elevate their own ego.
Yeah.
And as I like to put it, get preteens to call them senpai, and it's just gross.
That's it. And they're always English. It really winds me up.
Yeah.
They're giving us all a bad name. But okay, so sort of my kind of last question then is because obviously what I kind of do with this podcast is, aside from just chat with authors like yourself, is to sort of get advice for people who want to write creepypasta or online horror. What advice would you give to someone who's like thinking of picking up a pen or picking up their laptop and writing a story?
Smaller is better. Smaller is always going to be better than big and grandiose. The more moving pieces you have, the more stuff that you have to worry about. So really pare down what it is that you want to do. If you want to write short online horror, write short online horror. I would say if you're new to this, try and write a story in like 10 paragraphs at most. Really do short and do less. See what details you can get in a short amount of time, as opposed to writing something big and grandiose. Get away from idealism, because that's the antithesis of the kind of stuff that I write. If you want to do the kind of stuff that we've just been talking about now, you have to let go of idealism and just let a smaller story come through. I think that a lot of people like fan fiction. If you're young, you might like fan fiction. And fan fiction tends to have a very idealistic bend to it. And you might not even know what I mean, but I mean like, let's say you're writing like a Naruto fan fiction. I know I'm kind of giving a derogatory example, but like that's a larger than life character, Naruto. You do not want that. You want your narrator to kind of be an anybody, or more of an anybody. Not necessarily like I think maybe like Snake from Metal Gear. Snake from Metal Gear is like an empty slate that the person can project themselves onto, but he's still kind of like a womanizer, and he's like a military nerd and all that kind of stuff. You have to like limit the amount of information that your narrator has, your first person reader, the person who's writing the story has, and then allow the plot to really do the work, because I think that a lot of this stuff is more plot driven than character driven, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So that's qualitatively, that's what you should do if you want to do the kind of stuff that we've been talking about.
Nice. Cool, thanks for that. So before my last question, because it's a stupid one, do you have anything you want to plug? Is there, like, where can people find you? Like,
they can find me on the internet /Dead Palette. If you YouTube Dead Palette, you'll find my work and all the stuff that I'm on pretty easily. I have my own YouTube channel, and I also am on Undercooked Analysis, where we analyze short horror stories twice a week. Outside of that, I don't think. I mean, follow me on Twitter. I love interacting with people on Twitter. I love Twitter because I can just talk to anyone in my vicinity without any specific prompt. Like if I post a video, people want to talk about the video. You can talk to me about anything on Twitter, you know?
Yeah. Awesome. I will send you a few apps, in the middle of the night for funsies.
Okay.
Cool. So, I'd say thanks a lot for coming on. I really do appreciate it. I could actually listen to you talk about Creepypasta all night. I love it.
Thanks for having me on.
It's all good, and so I appreciate you've mentioned both wrestling and Metal Gear, so I feel like a proper podcaster now. But so before we go, one last question. As this podcast is called Insert Pasta Pun Here, what is your favourite pasta pun?
Oh shit. Well, I hate pasta and I hate thinking about it, so that's always great. I am terrible at puns. I can't. I'm having trouble thinking of one.
I'll let you off. No, I like trying to catch people off guard with it. I love a pun. They're tortellini amazing. No worries. Well, thanks a lot. As I say, I really appreciate it, and yeah, thanks for coming on.
Sure thing.
Nice one. So there you have it. There's my interview with Dead Palette. If this has taught me anything, it's that no one else seems to find puns as hilarious as I do. As always, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you all managed to get something from it. If you like what you're hearing, please head on over to insertpastapunhere.com, where you'll find more interviews like this and also some of my own writings. Next time we'll be back with hopefully another interview. We'll see. I haven't got any particular person lined up yet, so it'll be a surprise for everyone. I hope you enjoyed it, guys. I'll speak to you again soon.